If I don't buy the like neat wallets, you know, 5x7.
The dry weather is straight right now.
Looking at. Not even, that's like more than, there were two packages that were sold. Now you're right? So. Yes. I did. She's not every color. That's like the most normal.
This.
Yes. Like I'm sorry. What's that? I didn't find a picture of my graduation.
Yeah, I was done with it by that day. I was like, okay.
Yeah. Officially, right? And I never framed my undergrad. Yeah, I took time. So I decided for Christmas, that's what I want. And I'm just gonna pick out the two frames. Yeah, I wanted I know.
I said,
Uh-oh.
It's Tuesday. Yeah.
I'm just, you know, I have to work with.
They want.
Yeah.
No, it's like sports.
Yeah, that's a big one. I have no idea. There used to be two.
I know there was two.
I know. I love what when I.
He said, I'm a nobody.
Oh, yeah. It's good.
Yeah.
Yes.
Next is you.
So much people.
Oh, yeah.
I think I had it before I had it. Because I got that.
Thanks.
I finally, in spite of being in this, before this, I still feel like I was under like too many deadlines that are very away. It's like, I'm not.
I think it's like a little break here a little bit. I'm gonna take my chance. Yeah, according to that
Yeah.
So, I guess we'll be coordinating. Do you have anything?
It is.
Yeah, I guess the slide. So we will. That one. So we'll be formed in the January meeting.
Okay.
So you're taking on December 5th?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
So we'll take December 5th. I
Yes,
will
ma'am.
be
It's
here.
like we're in AA.
I'm going to be out. So the Wednesday that you're Thanksgiving. And I'll be back. with-
I come over every day.
What have you been?
I'm taking too tired.
I
Are you one here? Worried about?
Yes. So, so December 5th, I won't be here, but that's the one, that would be one of the things we'll be working on pretty much everything soon.
Okay, I'll make sure we keep in contact once I get the. I'll just send you all.
Brandon, did you press up? No, wait. Yeah.
Okay. So, but it was a meeting. It's just, that was tough.
I'll see you.
We did, we did some work. You know, we'd be in meetings at like. I figured at least they get us both. Everybody's talking.
Yeah, it's not like it's always pro here. And not here, it's there. It's the world is getting.
I think we should start. Where is everybody? Oh, it's 12:03. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. We're convening the Technical Advisory Committee for the MPO for Waco. Actually, I'm Amy Vermont-Kyland. I'm your new chairperson. So we'll jump right in. The first item on the agenda is a presentation and discussion about Waco's 2023 thoroughfare plan update. We're sort of in the middle of updating our thoroughfare plan. We're at the point where we'd like input from adjoining cities and like to share with you where we're at and what we're thinking. So this is really our draft of where we're at today, and I'm gonna let my friends from Killinghorn do the presentation so that you can get some information about our thoroughfare plan.
Hey, how are y'all? Ryan Chamber, Kimley Horn, also with you, John Green. Got a little bit of a walkthrough on where we're at in the development of the draft plan. Accomplished today. Talk a little bit about kind of how we got there, but we also some background on the history of the thoroughfare plan in the region. Introduce some of the cross sections that I introduced into the development of the plan. Also the process in which we've gone through to introduce some of the refinements in the thoroughfare plan, and then talk a little bit about what's next. So first we want to kind of discuss about really, the evolution of the thoroughfare plan. Many of you know it. I mean, when the initial plan was developed back in 2000, really that looked at providing obviously an adequate and efficient roadway network throughout the region, providing connectivity and between the jurisdictions was a critical component to that, but also making sure that from an emergency response standpoint, making sure for bus routes and connectivity through the schools, having a roadway system that really supports that. Also, there's the other part of this is, the thoroughfare plan is to designate roadway or right-of-way requirements, what's needed from whether it's number of lanes, but acquiring that right-of-way. But then there's also a city Waco ordinance that prescribe right-of-way widths and pavement sections. Not always consistent with what was included in the 2000 thoroughfare plan even today. What was, with the change in the updates to the 2012 plan, there were a bigger focus on introducing multimodal kind of consideration, context sensitive design and planning. Those concepts were brought to into the development of the plan, but also some of these other new goals, such as suburban connectivity, urban vitality, just the character of the communities themselves and what they were wanting to accomplish within the region, and also different mode choices, right? It's not just about vehicle modes of travel. So understanding that now, kind of where do we go, and even collectors really are only shown under one class on the current thoroughfare plan. So let's talk about some of the cross sections. To do that, we want to really describe what currently exists in terms of the actual thoroughfare plan on the 2012 versus the city's subdivision ordinance, because those two documents themselves and really define the minimum right-of-way requirements, right? But also for collectors and arterials, but they really don't have any dimensions tied to that in terms of cross section, nor do they include any include anything related to bike and pedestrian facilities. It's not really discussed. And then you see by the different roadway sections. So you look, we kind of organize the information both for the thoroughfare plan and the subdivision ordinance by street type, by right of way, and pavement width. So you can see while arterials and collectors are identified, there are differences in terms of right of way. In terms of the thoroughfare plan, there's a range of right of way from 100 to 120 feet. Whereas per ordinance on, let's say for the principal arterials, it's 108 feet. Okay, so, and that's historically what has been, required, and in terms of whether it's for development or roadways and at a specific pavement section. Same thing, there's inconsistencies between the subdivision ordinance and the thoroughfare plan between, even the designation by name, whether it's a minor rural collectors versus commercial industrial. So there's opportunities here to really take this and really eliminate some of the inconsistencies, clean up some of this. And so what we've done, we've looked at identifying some proposed cross sections and what that would look like to really introduce, instead of for arterials, we have going from principal arterials, minor arterials. And again, with the differences between the right of way, both preferred. We understand that there are some locations or arterials throughout the region where, you know, we're not going to be able to get any additional right of way because it may currently be an existing 108 feet. That may be a constrained arterial section, and there probably will always be that. But if, as additional arterials, whether they're either suburban or rural, we would like to have 120 feet of right of way. But understanding maybe in some of your more minor arterials, that would be down to 100 feet. Pavement widths, again, now we're starting to think about, okay, within that right of way, both number of lanes, all 4-lane sections, but also introduce some of the parkway and both on-street and off-street pedestrian and bike facilities and how that would be impacted both from on the arterials to the collectors. So we are, again, from a street context standpoint, we're looking at both suburban and rural. And then from the collectors, we would have essentially on your major collectors, those would be suburban and rural and then residential collectors. Okay, so what's we want to introduce today is also the actual cross sections. I mean, today, the only cross sections that are through this the city's design street standards are really only for collectors that provide any kind of dimensions. And some of those sections aren't consistent with what the pavement width sections that are prescribed by ordinance. So again, opportunities to kind of clean that up. But here are the 4 different sections that we have cross sections for arterials, also for collectors. We'll show those in a minute. But so from suburban arterials, both kind of a recommended, but also the preferred at 123 feet of right of way, and also a constrained, one being at 120 and then 108. Where on both 4-lane facilities, medians to allow on the 120-foot section, allow for potentially traffic signals, allow for dual lefts at intersections, but also turn lanes in the median. But also a parkway that would allow for a shared use path, 10-foot shared use path offset from the back of curb. But also that would allow for multimodal type bike and pedestrian travel. Similar type of section there, but again, within the 108-foot section on the constrained suburban arterial. Again, a shared use path with a 10-foot section, but just a narrower median. And then as our rural arterial, still at 120 feet of right of way, but then at 2-lane roadway, but allow for future expansion to 4-lane, depending on the needs of the capacity. If it needs to be expanded to 4 lanes, that can be done to the outside, but then a rural cross section. And then the constrained rural arterial within the 100 feet of right of way, that would have 2 lanes, wide shoulders with a center left turn lane within 100 feet. Any questions about the arterial sections? No. Okay. We also want to think about providing options to consider multimodal on-street facilities. So whether that's bike facilities on street and how that occurs within the proposed sections as it relates to your collector facilities. And staff would then be given the opportunity, depending on land use and adjacent surrounding areas, to introduce some of those elements based on the proposed sections. So the cross sections for the collectors, again, we have suburban and rural collectors, and then the third one at the bottom is a residential collector. The right-of-way required right-of-way for suburban and rural collectors is 80 feet and 60 feet for residential collectors. Again, on the top, the section there for suburban collectors, that's where we're starting to introduce some of those on-street facilities, whether it be on-street parking or bike facilities, And then sidewalks, pedestrian facilities will be adjacent to the back of curve. Because it's on the back of curve, again, a wider facility, 8 feet in width, to provide a kind of a safer, kind of a buffer off the back of curve. But again, a 2-lane facility and with on-street parking or bike facilities, depending on the needs.
So for that top one, we had talked about, it wouldn't be parking on one side and bike lane on the other. There's 2 sort of examples of half sections there. One side has the bike lane incorporated, and the other side has the parking.
Yeah, we show this as maybe an option 1 or option 2, so it could be one or the other. Yep. Thanks, Andy. The middle section again for the rural collector, a rural section, but it's 2 lanes with shoulders, but it'll allow you to, if you needed to add an additional lane feature depending on growth or traffic conditions in the future. Still have a shoulder regardless. And then the last section here on the residential collector, 2-lane facility, on-street bike facilities. Again, we as an option there, but with also, again, your pedestrian facility off the back of curb. So those are the cross sections. So we also want to talk about a little bit of the process and developing of the overall thoroughfare. And the idea here is we kind of walk through some of the inventory and classification, but also some of the future alignments and parameters in which we went through that process. So our overall approach really starts to think about, what are we thinking about in terms of the process of updating the plan? What opportunities exist? What things are we considering? Obviously, with this, we're going to be looking at improved connections throughout the Waco area. When you start to look at additional connectivity, there's opportunities for short trip lengths. Not put so much burden on your larger facilities, but provide better connections supporting the future land uses and development as it occurs. And when that occurs, to be able to get the right of way where you need it. But also introduce, as we've talked about this in this section, introduce some of those multimodal bike ped facilities and opportunities for those travel options to occur. But also, again, one of the main approaches where we need to get right away, let's get it, but also having these sections and something to allow us to be able to plan and include these as part of future projects, understanding exactly what's needed and the types of elements that are included within the roadway. So we started developing an overall inventory of the existing network. Through use of existing aerials and imagery and actually driving the system, understanding what's currently out there as it relates to not only the existing thoroughfare plan, but also the national highway system. How does it relate to both of those documents? But also, does the road currently exist in its full configuration relative to the thoroughfare plan? Are there opportunities? Are there needs for widening? So we looked at capacity, existing capacity. Is it rural? Is it urban? Is it curb and gutter? What facilities exist on those roadways? Are there existing sidewalks or needs for sidewalks or pedestrian facilities, or there bike facilities on existing roadways? So we documented all of that. All that's in our GIS environment. Again, we talked about that's going to be provided, and having both the existing conditions, but also the proposed thoroughfare plan. And then we looked at, I mentioned, kind of making sure that the existing thoroughfare plan is consistent and also understands and informs both the national highway system as it relates, because that's been an issue that has been in place. Understanding that these roadways are critical to mobility and to travel throughout the United States. It includes everything from the interstate system all the way to your collector roadways, and it really serves as the backbone of the national system. So it's maintained by TxDOT, and we also, it really is kind of then becomes it's shown in a lot of the mapping and that's provided through some, which TechStop provides is kind of the base layer for a lot of the mapping. So from a functional classification standpoint, we classified roadways either as arterials and collectors based on existing traffic volumes that we attain. Also, are there roadways that are either under or over capacity, or again, we mentioned earlier about the need for upgrades. Again, understanding whether showing roadways in consistency with the NHS, but also how it relates back to the existing thoroughfare plan. Is it currently at its existing designation, or does it need to be changed? From future alignments, we looked at we analyzed opportunities for new connections where we thought, based on existing land uses and areas where, again, focusing on arterials and collectors, where can we provide additional connectivity? Are there existing arterials that where we need to have new arterials identified in other areas that are currently undeveloped? And you can see a lot of the areas that are shown here where we've got some of the changes that you'll see are, focusing even out throughout the ETJ. But also there's opportunities where existing thoroughfares, whether they need to potentially change the designation, and when we looked at opportunities for connectivity, we understand that there may be constraints. We've got whether there's water features or areas where it would be challenging to provide new roadway. We took all that within the existing parcels and land uses to kind of take those in consideration to identify new roadways for future alignments. So what's really next, and what we're kind of showing here is we kind of see the difference between the existing thoroughfare plan and the proposed thoroughfare plan. So you can start to see from left to right, there's a lot more additional new thoroughfares shown, while there are some additional roadways within the city limits and incorporated boundaries. A lot of the new roadways are shown to provide improved new thoroughfares and connectivity throughout the ETJ and beyond. So we're wanting to get feedback on some of these future alignments. These connections make sense. We've even shown some areas where this is the proposed thoroughfare plan. We've also shown both locations where we've upgraded existing facilities or they're new additions. So anything shown that's red dash, those are actually new roadways. Anything that's in blue is what we consider an upgraded facility. Anything shown in green is downgraded facility. Yeah. No, I'm sorry. Green is upgraded, blue is downgraded. So if it changed in functional classification up or down, we've shown that blue or green, but then the dashed facilities are the proposed alignments. We also, for your convenience, we want to get feedback through an online mapping tool so that it will allow you to go and look in your areas of interest, if it maybe within your city or area, what's being proposed, and it will allow you to go and provide feedback, provide comments, to add points and say, hey, we've got, or you think this alignment should, we can add actual alignments to there, or provide comments on any areas that have changed. So we want this, and so there's a feedback form that is now going to pass out that essentially talks about, it's kind of instructions for you. There's a QR code. Got to have QR codes to, if you want to be, you can access through your mobile phone, but there's also a link that we're going to provide you that would send you over to a website, and that would be one of the ways in which you can obviously drop your comments onto the proposed thoroughfare plan. It does, again, like I said, location specific recommendations. You can do things by corridor. And then there's a legend that kind of shows and explains what's being added or changed on the cell. So that is a real brief overview of what's been working on. We can go back and talk about anything that we presented. Want to get y'all talking about what's being proposed. We know it's going to take some time to kind of work through that, but any discussions today?
dotted lines, is that like another, a move around?
Yeah, the black line there is the ETJ boundary. So this may be, so on this. And again, we'll have the map, this is the map that you'll see, which actually shows the proposed roadways and thoroughfares, both by arterial and collectors, both within cities, but also, again, it also has the Lake Waco and different areas there, and any rivers are shown there too, but any proposed roadways, they're designated on the map. So then that could be compared against the existing thoroughfare plan, and you can see the difference. And this does show anything you see dashed in red is a new alignment. It's a new thoroughfare. And if we, if you need to see, do we need to add something to this to maybe add another layer? Do we want to see parcel boundaries or anything else that maybe not be shown? We can do that, and we can update that and refresh it and provide it. But this just gives you an idea of again, so this is the actual, this would then show it by designation, both collector and arterials. And freeways, there's some areas now where I mentioned that some roadways have been, downgraded in blue. Maybe they were freeway or a principal. Now they're more suburban arterial that's changing designation. They may still be an arterial, but we're reclassifying it. Maybe because of right of way or just or it may be an existing freeway, and we think it will, in terms of the designation, needs to be arterial. So you see there's some changes along there on 84, something like that. Some of these things may make complete sense, but we want to make sure you understand what changes occurred and where they occurred.
I would really encourage you to put a little thought into it and provide us with some feedback, because this isn't the city of Waco saying this is what we want to do. This is the city of Waco saying we're working on this planning document, and it should be able to help the local cities as well, with a resource that you maybe would not have been able to have in your city. So you can give us feedback and we can incorporate that into this overall plan. So it would be fantastic if we could have feedback before Thanksgiving. Once we hit Thanksgiving, everybody gets incredibly busy and probably will lost.
November 14th.
Oh, earlier, that's right.
November 14th.
Okay, so we did talk about that. I forgot about the date, right? So if you can take it back, and maybe do some talking, with your city about what makes sense for you, and thinking into the future about how you want to be able to travel around the whole area or get to the interstate, other than, taking like Chore Drive and from the side of town. This is our opportunity to update this. It's definitely time for us to do some thinking and make sure that we don't sort of get locked out of having options in the future. And that's really where we're thinking is, what do we need to know that we have to plan for in the future, so that we don't end up with transportation bottlenecks because we didn't stop to think about it today. And in 10 years, we need it, or 20 years or 50 years. So I would very much appreciate your input. It's very important for our whole area to think into the future about these things.
We'll be sending out a link to the online map later this afternoon. That way you can actually access the map on your computers, writing comments. You can also scan the QR code to look at it on your phone, but not as easy to write comments, so you still can observe it.
Thoughts or questions about them? You can add whatever you think to your thumb.
So one of the important items here is the relationship that thoroughfare plan has with subdivision ordinance and regulations.
Yeah.
And we do expect that some of the areas around throughout Middleton County are probably working on their subdivision regulations. So thinking about the thoroughfare plan in the context of new subdivision becomes really important, so that it's not just a matter of where the main physical materials and the collectors are, but also how do they actually relate to some of the subdivision ordinance that all the communities already have on their books, or what you might be thinking about.
Yeah, the city's in the process of updating our design standards for street and stormwater, and also sort of stripping those design criteria out of our ordinance and putting them in a separate design manual. So this is all part of this big process that we're in the midst of at this point. Okay. So the next item is something else. Oh, everybody, I'm sorry. It's my first time, sorry. Okay, so we should have introduced everybody, so my apologies. I guess we'll start with Annette and work our way around.
Yeah, I'll let you.
Planner, or the
Or Roy also planner with me here.
Bradley Miller, city planner, city attorney. Well, there's.
Sorry, Steve Sen, general manager of the transit system, transit manager for the county road transit district.
Around Torres, Director of State Resources and
Amy Brewer, Highland Director of Public Works, City of Waco.
Mukesh Kumar, quickly.
Andy Moore, public works director, place of.
Victor Gable, the Director of Transportation Planning and Development.
Like Zach, Waco area engineer. Perhaps having an assistant city engineer for Waco area, all this stuff. Brunson Lane, planning for stuff.
Greg Snidall, Assistant Director of Public Works, City Development.
John Green, yeah, it's Timothy Horn. Brian, Jennifer, Kevin White.
Danielle Gallegos, Waco MPO, engagement specialist.
Coordinated, quarterly. You're supposed to have that up in the beginning. Okay, our next item of discussion is review and discussion regarding a vision statement developed during the regional vision workshop conducted last week, right?
Yes.
Just last week, to guide our long range planning development for our 2045 metro transportation.
Thank you. So several of you here were also part of the regional visioning workshop. And after about 3 hours of wonderful discussions, what we came up with is this statement. And I'm going to read it verbatim. And what we really like to do is have your feedback into whether it actually reflects the vision that we discussed that day or not. And simultaneously, we also want to see if we can improve this cleaned up a little bit, because I must admit, I've seen several vision statements, and this is actually one of the lengthier ones that we have come up with, and I've seen them very short and sweet. But the most important part is that we need to make sure that the entire region is reflected accurately in this vision statement. So I'm going to go ahead and read this. The 2050 Waco MPO Metropolitan Transportation Plan. This is our long-range plan that we are required to do, and we will be working on this so that we adopt it in the January of 2025. So the 2050 Waco MPO Metropolitan Transportation Plan will serve as a catalyst for inclusive regionalization that seeks to make our community physically healthy, economically prosperous, equitable in its accessible mobility, technologically up-to-date and resilient, while enhancing its ability to tackle the climate crisis and preserve its national assets across all life stages. Engaging in strategies which are grounded in community input and involvement and a broad understanding of performance metrics will lead to a safe and accessible metro. So this vision statement, it took us, so the process of MTP development, we began with a brainstorming group from January through May. We came up with the approach and scope document for what does the next MTP needs to look like, the approach we want to take. We organized a public listening session in which we invited several different agencies we typically do not hear from, such as Public Health, Watershed Division, Baylor University, the Chambers of Commerce, Public Health, I already mentioned, city sustainability officer, and we wanted to make sure that we hear their concerns and relates to transportation infrastructure. And then we organized a regional listening session just before the last policy board meeting. And most of the members of the policy board were there, and they also brought their advisors with them. And with that, we also had breakout sessions. And so some of the major items that came up, and I'm not going to go through each one of them, just go to the next slide. We just listed them. So these are all in the slides there, so if you wanted to take a look at them. And these are all the major items that we discussed that day. And we wanted to make sure that all of these items are in fact reflected into our listening session. The way this vision is going to work out is that we'll take this vision and break it down and implement it, and in terms of a call for proposal framework and the project evaluation criteria. We will spend the next 2 months doing that. And after that, we'll open the call for proposal. And this is one very important fundamental that we are changing how we develop the MTP this time. So in this time, once we have the call for proposal, we receive the proposals, we evaluate them. That will allow us to rank them in terms of priority and value that we assign to them for the next 5 years. What it does is it does several things. One thing, one of the important things is that we wanted to first pull out what the region actually wants and actually reflect it in the projects that we're proposing. And on top of it, this will also give clear direction to TechStar for which projects should they be looking at in the prioritized form. And so that's where we are. And so with this vision statement, can we go back to the vision statement slide? If you have any thought or comment, if you have any comment now, you can comment now, or if you have any thoughts, just email any of us and we will try to refine it to the best extent possible and present the very final version to the policy board in 2 weeks from now. But if there is a term here that does not make sense to you, then ask for it so that because if we can't explain it, that means that it's too vague and we need to do some things a little different.
Anybody have any thoughts, or do you need to marinate on it?
I think just email you like this again.
It is like day. It is. Don't you have thoughts about what you think we could?
I'm thinking about it too. I think so.
Yeah, make it a little shorter, more succinct, that's fine too. Okay, the next item is review, discussion, and action regarding a recommendation to the Waco MPO Policy Board to solicit public comments concerning revisions to its public participation plan.
So our public participation plan, can you go to the next slide? Our public participation plan is one of the most important documents we not only maintain, but we update them from time to time. Last time we updated it was roughly just about over a year ago. And so it is time again, we typically do pay attention to our public participation plan to make sure that it reflects not only all the requirements, but we are actually engaged with the public in the most meaningful way. So within the staff, we have started reviewing our public participation plan to see all the changes that we need to make. So what I wanted to let you all know and also ask, if you have time, I understand public participation plan is not necessarily a planning document that you all consult with on a regular basis, but if you have time and you would like to take a look at it, please do, because what we plan to do is present at the January meeting of the TAC first and then to the policy board what the staff is recommending for what changes we need to make to the policy, to our PPP. And after that, we will have the review, discussion, and action with January and March, because it takes a 45-day public process. What this means is that once we get the go-ahead from you all and the policy board, we will keep the public process on for 45 days. And so it won't be until March that we can formally adopt the changes. So that's what we have about the public participation plan. And if there is any question or comment at this point in time, you know,
That's on your website.
the document is anonymous. Yes. It's one of the documents that we are required by federal regulations that we must keep it maintained, and it must be visible for everyone to see at all times. So any comment you have, let us know. We will be working on the staff side for the next 2 months, trying to figure out all the changes that we need to be making, and then we'll have a draft for to present at the January meeting, all the changes we're making. Then 45 days public process, we'll do public meetings and such, and then do either adopt a completely thoroughly revised CPP or amend it.
The next item is discussion and update regarding selection of the consulting firm to complete our comprehensive safety action.
So I know this is one of the items that we have been talking about for a long time, that we received the 2022 SS4A grant for $700,000. And since then, we have executed the grant and we issued the RFP, and we received applications for 4 consulting firms. There are Adura, ATG, Kimley, Hall, TJ, and in the alphabetical order here. And the evaluation team has completed its evaluations. And now the highest ranked consultant is the one we will be approaching and seeing if they are agreeable to our requirements. And there are really 2 very important items that we have been considering. One is really the, we want to make sure that the expected completion is May 2014. To be precise, it needs to be May 16 exactly. Primarily because, and this is the part I really want to emphasize, and so whichever consulting firm works on this plan, they will be working very closely with every city within Metro County. And what it means is that every project that we develop, it needs to be developed with the city. So most of you sitting in this room are actually going to be driving a lot of those projects. And what we hope to do is that as we work through that, we know that implementation proposals are more involved. So when we write the planning proposals for the SS4A, they require a little less effort than what implementation proposals take. And so what is important is that you all start working on your implementation project proposals beginning sometime in February. And that's one reason why we will be working closely with each one of you to make sure that whatever proposal you're making, you have plenty of time. And the May deadline then really works that just before submitting your proposal, that you can directly point out that this project is already listed in our comprehensive safety action plan. And so in terms of timeline, what we're expecting is policy board will act on, we're expecting policy board to act on November 16th to give the notice to proceed to the, November 16th for the notice to proceed to the consulting firm. And just for that, can you update us on the SS Safety Action Task Force?
Yeah, the task force is having their first meeting on November 13th, Monday at 2 o'clock. Made up of representatives at different police departments, public works departments, and cities, and other stakeholders from across the county.
Yeah. So with that, the Safety Action Task Force will be working very closely with the consulting firm. And so policy board is expected to give the notice to proceed on November 16th. May 16th is when we are expecting a complete draft of the report to be officially adopted by the policy board, so that we can point you directly that this project is in the comprehensive safety action plan. And that's what makes it eligible for every city in the McLennan County to actually apply for implementation. But I can't emphasize enough, implementation grant proposals take longer time. you can't put that, you can't complete them in 2 weeks or 3 weeks process. It probably is going to take everybody at least 2 to 3 months to actually do them. And so it is going to be crucially important that we have the projects identified at the preliminary list by February, and then you all start working on the implementation along with the consultants so that we can define the project according to what you put.
Going to be a wonderful opportunity for all of us in this region to get some of these projects together, getting funded and constructed. The next item on the agenda is discussion and updates from Scott regarding significant highway construction.
Slide here. First project is Spring Valley, continuing to work on east half of the roadway. Should start paving operations between Old Temple and Sun Valley later this month. I anticipate hopefully switching traffic later this year. Started working on the west half of the roadway, still on pace for that fall completion. Highway 6, if you want to go to the pictures here. Bagby currently running in its final configuration. Really the only thing remaining here is replacing the signals with upgraded signals. But other than that, traffic is in, again, final configuration. Moving to the west, bulk of the work is working on main lane construction here. Actually started some paving operations that'll continue through the winter. Here at Beverly, we've been setting beams for the last 2 weeks. We've got our last shift tonight to complete setting both structures. Anticipate pouring one of those bridge decks right before Thanksgiving, the second shortly thereafter, and that will continue through the rest of the year. Here's just some shots from the beam setting operation last week. Moving towards Imperial, again, the bulk of the work here is on the actual main lanes in the middle. Everything's been great, working on flex space, and again, you'll see paving operations pick up, weather permitting, throughout this year. The bridge is closest to 84, but again, this is an older photo of both of the existing bridges have since been demoed. Currently anticipate starting beam sets here the week of November 13th. That'll be a week to 2 week process, and then in December, those bridge decks will be placed. Moving to 84, the bulk of this time work is done with the exception of a single driveway to the Bolero, kind of at the top right of the screen here. That'll be poured shortly, and then within the next week or so, you'll have 2 lanes open on the frontage road, and that will clean up a lot of the congestion from there on that discount. I added on the opening slide, but still looking at a substantial completion date of February timeframe on this project. It's a lot to get done in the next few months, but things are really starting to come together. I-35 resurfacing project, again, this ties into the 4B project limits, goes to the north up to 77 on the northbound side, all paving we completed. Southbound, we've completed our milling operations. Weather kind of restricted some of the asphalt placement this week, but they'll get back on it starting Sunday night with about 2 weeks worth of work remaining there. We'll have all of our final service in place. And there's a few ancillary items to do with some guardrail upgrades, safety improvements, cross drainage structures. That'll linger beyond that, but again, the pavement work is anticipated. FM 434 University Park widening. This is widening, adding a continuous left turn lane between LaSalle all the way down to Loop 340. Big Creek has completed all their cross drainage structure installations and starting subgrade widening in the south half of the roadway. It's about a year-long project, so that work will continue to the end of next year.
Sorry, I have a question. It wasn't on that slide, but on, I think it's actually it's New Road and between New Road and Franklin. I don't think it's tech stop, but somebody's working on that over past. Do you know what
The bridge over the railroad?
Yes, ma'am.
That's us. We're doing some cleaning and sealing those joints because that bridge is not in the best condition. So we're trying to buy some more time.
I was asking everybody.
Yes, yeah, Yeah, we're. Okay, board group updates, next on the list, do we have anything from like Ben?
So we don't have a representative here. The most important part is that on the bike ped, I apologize for the, no, actually, it's correct. November 15th, 2023. That's our next meeting, and we're really excited about this because for some of you, so we're gonna walk or bike to World Cup Cafe. And so, you know, all of you are welcome to join us. What we will do is that at 10:15, we'll begin a bike ride from 401 Franklin, that's the Development Center building entrance, that's the corner of Franklin and 4th Street. And related to that, I have some very exciting news. You will see in the email that you received the stakeholders that one of the local group that encourages people to bike, walk, and paddle and swim and such. They have just offered to allow us to borrow as many bikes as we want, just for that bike ride that day. So if you want to it's going to be a nice day that day, at least according to the weather forecast so far. It's going to be a nice day, and so we can even arrange for the bike you would like, and we can ride from 401 Franklin to World Cup Cafe, walk around a bit. We have also contacted Urban Reap. They do composting and a bunch of sustainability work in the area. They'll give us a tour that day after our meeting, and we'll have lunch at the World Cup Cafe. They'll actually bring us in there. Unfortunately, you will have to pay for your lunch, but it's a really wonderful lunch, and we have that too. And some people who don't want to ride a bike, they can walk. And so what we have decided to, everybody who wants to walk to the spot, begin at the Dewey Park. It's next to Bosque Boulevard. And from the Dewey Park, I will take about 20 minutes walk. It's a 20 minutes walk. And so you will start at 10:30 from Dewey Park. And then you'll walk down to World Cup Cafe. And so Dewey Park also has plenty of parking, so you can park your car there. Whichever one works for you. If you can't do either, then just come directly at 11 o'clock. That's when our meeting is. And we have some exciting events going on with that. The second part, connected automated vehicle. Our last meeting was on October 18, 2023. There were two very important things that came up. One was that there is this growing recognition that we lack charging infrastructure for east-west corridors. So that north-south corridor is fairly fine now, especially because under the NEVI initial alternative corridor plan, there's a 50-mile gap that we want to make sure that direct fast charging stations were available every 50 miles. That has been completed, and so I-35 portion in McLennan County is considered to be saturated with that. And so, however, several people who drive electric cars, they have pointed out that east-west travel is still sort of dicey. There aren't enough, there aren't sufficient charging infrastructure. So that's what we will be looking at as part of our next round of NEVI planning, because once the AFC corridors are completed, next up will send us directive about how to proceed with the next round of funding. And if I recall correctly, for the Waco MPO area, we're expected to have, don't quote me exactly on this, but I believe it's about $1.8 billion worth of charging stations, plus another $450,000 for operations and maintenance for the next 5 years. So that's the amount of funding we will be looking at. But we are waiting for the TechStart NEVI group to give us the direction to go forward with that. That was one very important point. The other important point was that we are beginning to see quite a lot of testing, at least for the automated vehicle. And Cruise had started, so we had some reporting on the Cruise testing in Austin, although some of you probably heard that Cruise has been pulled out completely from all the markets. And so there were some challenges in California, and the state of California asked them to pull it out completely. What I've heard is that, some of the risk associated with accident matters were not dealt properly. That was really the most important concern there, meaning that, if these connected automated vehicles typically have enough cameras to capture almost everything that happens. And so, but the question often is the security of the footage, who handles them, how do they handle it, how much of it is open data, how much of it is private data. And those were some of the challenges that have not been worked out. So even from the city of Austin, the testing of the cruise taxis have actually been left at the last heard. So those are some of the major discussions we had. What we plan to do is prior to our next meeting, which will be January, we plan to do a very brief white paper on some of these ideas on where the charging station locations need to be and what are some of the consideration policy board needs to keep in mind while recommending for the next review planning where these stations are going to be. So those are the two very exciting updates we have. Okay. Any question?
I'm gonna catch you said to ride the bike, you have to arrive at what time?
10:15.
15, it's a
Yes.
walk, it's 10:30.
Yes.
Okay.
And we will be sending it out in the email with all the, and also for the borrowing of the bike. And so if you can't, because a lot of us do have bikes at home, but we may not have our bike carrier to bring the bike here. So if you'd rather just have somebody bring a bike for you, they can actually get you a bike of your size, which is so exciting. It's not just some generic bike. You can just tell them that this is your height, and they will actually bring a bike to of your size.
Can I have an e-bike?
I don't think they're carrying a bike right now. They're working at it now.
Any other questions now? Okay, next is the MPO monthly report.
Yeah, so the most important part of the vision statement is being worked on. So MTP call for proposal will be based on that vision statement. The update I have is that we're looking into we're looking into bringing one more person to work on a part-time basis for the next 2 to 3 months, develop the call for proposal so that at the January meeting, we actually want to bring you a draft of what that call for proposal and product development criteria would look like. And if you all are fine with that, then at the January meeting itself, policy board can adopt it, and then we can open the call for proposal for the next 6 months. If January is something if you all think that it requires a lot more changes, then we'll pull it out from the January meeting, work on it, and bring it to the February meeting. That's the flexibility we give ourselves. Safety Action Task Force, we already covered. For the rates grant, there is no new movement. What we are doing is that just wanted to remind everybody that we received $4.8 million in federal funding to do a smart network corridor for 9-mile corridor with half-mile on both side buffer, beginning at Taylor Street and I-35, and off after that to Franklin, to Square 298 to US 84, all the way to Pichu. And we are expecting to execute that grant with the Federal High Administration in the first quarter of next year. And once we do that, by that point in time, we'll be bringing several scope of work ideas here to these meetings, get your input feedback, so that after we execute the grant, we can do the request for proposals. For the local fund contributions, several of you who were involved initially in the local fund creation, and it has worked out wonderfully so far, because this is why we were so successful at getting even the public agency listening session, because we just created working lunch for that group. Same thing for the visioning workshop. And so what we'll be sending out is a letter reminding that by March 15th, we would be requesting you to make that contribution again. And it's really these contributions that have allowed us to apply for these federal grants as aggressively as we have gone after this. And the fact that we have these 2 grants right now, we have 2 other grants that are under consideration that we submitted. We also submitted a 2023 Safety Action Safe Street for All program grant, and we also submitted a SMART grant recently. So none of this would have been possible. So that local fund contribution has been tremendously helpful. Thank you, and you will be seeing a letter from us again. For the TIA project, this is the exciting one. Although we were disappointed to see some of the projects that did not get funded, but the ones that got funded were still very exciting projects. And so we have one project in the city of Waco, that's the Carver neighborhood on Dallas Street project. What we're really excited about that is that MKT trail is already under construction underway. And now this will allow us to really connect it all the way down to the river. And that will be a huge contribution to the overall. It will improve the accessibility of the riverfront itself, as well as the MKT trail to get to before. There are two other projects from City of Waco in the downtown project, we are not funded. They're also very exciting projects, so hopefully it will, apply to them again in the next round. Similarly, a project from City of Woodway was funded. This is around Woodway Elementary, some sidewalk improvement from all the way around. There was about $1 million. City of Waco's Dallas Street Carbon neighborhood was about 3.6 some million dollars. And the project that also got funded was City of Clark, about $1.5 million. And another project we were very excited about that did not get funded from City of McGregor for the Cotton Belt Parkway, but we are again expecting that project to be applied for again the next round, because we know that there is quite a bit of interest. That's a really exciting project.
So announcements, as Nikesh already alluded to, our next meeting is going to be in 2024, January 4th. Do we have any requests for any agenda items for the January? None. I think we will adjourn at 2:16. Thank you, everybody, for coming. To answer your question about Valerie,